please join me in a warm welcome for Kao Kalia Yang.
Thank you so much, Maria. Librarians offer the best readings and readings. I'm so honored to be here. Hello, can you all hear me in the back? There's a signing table here. There are 2 chairs available if anybody would like to sit there. I'm not going to sit there until the signing, so please don't be shy. And then there's at least 1 chair here and here as well. So please feel free to find a seat. I am super happy to be here with all of you. What a joy it is to wake up on a Saturday morning and be in community. I think especially at a time when the world feels so far apart. I'm going to start out immediately with the reading because I think there's no better way to meet a writer than via her words. So this is The Rock in My Throat. I became a children's book author in 2019, and we all know what happened in 2020. So I never learned how to do the thing that librarians do so well when you read like this. I'm going to stand up here and read from a book, and you're going to magically watch the PowerPoint advance so you get the best visuals. This book is illustrated by Ji-Mei Lin, and Ji-Mei represented the United States of America this year at the World Illustration Competition. So you're in for a treat. The art is exquisite. The music that you'll be hearing as I'm reading is original, and it's a soundtrack for The Rock in My Throat by Minnesota's own Jocelyn Hagen, an incredibly talented composer. In fact, Jocelyn and I, we teamed up and became good friends because the song poet became Minnesota Opera's first, and the first in the nation, long mission operatic. It never happened before, production in the country. And in their history, it was the first time there was a female librettist and a female composer working together. So we knew that that was a historical moment, and such moments, they don't just come. It takes generations of hard work. So we became dear friends, and that collaboration has continued across many books. So it's Jocelyn's music you'll be hearing. This is The Rock in My Throat by Kao Kalia Yang, illustrated by Ji-Mei Lin. My dedication. For everyone who has trouble speaking, trouble being heard, for everyone who has lived without understanding on their side, Ji-Mei's dedication for my parents. The Rock in My Throat. Is that easier? Working? Okay. Oh, it is working. Okay, perfect. It is working. Recess is the hardest time of the day. All the kids are playing. Some are on the playground and others are in the field by the side of the school. There's a group on the pavement in front of me. The teachers are all busy watching over the kids and talking. I look at the sky, I look at the ground, I look at my feet, I look at my hands. I look all around so the people can't see that I'm lonely. I am relieved when I see a feather on the ground. It is a gray feather, a small one like dandelion fluff, only a little bigger. I pick it up. It is soft in my hands. It is mysterious. I hold it in one hand. I touch it with my other. I study it. I am more interested in the feather today than I was interested in the leaf yesterday. Perfect. Does it work there? I am also happy to just think it's okay. That's perfect. I think we're back. After school, I tell my mother about the sky and the ground. I tell her my feet are small while my hands might grow large. I tell her about the feather I found. the feather I have in my pocket. My mother says in home, her words make me stop talking. I feel the feather in the pocket of my jeans become smaller and smaller. Inside my pocket, my right hand reaches for the place where the feather is, afraid that it will disappear. Later, I look at my mother across the table from me. I would never tell her about the moment I decided to stop talking if I can help it. I don't want to be like the many people who speak English. There's a rock in my throat now, and it grows heavier by the day. I don't want to be like the woman in the store, the woman who tapped her hand on the counter when my mother tried to ask what the light bulbs were, but didn't know the English words. The one who looked away when my mother said, "I'm looking for the thing that makes the world shiny." The English words in my mother's mouth were sweet and sticky like candy, and they wrapped themselves up in her teeth. Her tongue tried to read the words, but it took time that the English-speaking people don't have. That day, the woman grew bigger and bigger behind the counter. My mother and I grew smaller and smaller in front of it. Now I blink and blink and blink. Across the dining table, I shrug at my mother, letting my shoulders go up and then down. I say, "Kuchiboklia?" At first, no one noticed when I stopped talking at school. I continued to sit at my assigned desk. I continued to keep my desk clean, my hands to myself. I continued to keep my eyes on the teacher at the front of the classroom. One day, our teacher is sick. We have a substitute who looks a lot like her teacher. She doesn't know who any of us are, but she has a list with our names on it. She calls them one by one. My last name starts with a Y, and I know I'm last. I try to clear my throat as I listen, as all the kids say here when their names are called. Trying to get the air out of my mouth feels like I'm pushing my heart up into my throat. When the teacher says Kao Yang, I really try to say here, but the only sound I'm able to make is a shaking cough. She says louder, scanning the room, trying to find me among the desks. The teacher finds me because all the other children are looking at me. They are not all mean looks. A few of them, the nice ones, show on their faces that they hurt a little for me. I dig into the carpet of our classroom with the tip of my shoes. I want the floor to open up and suck me down, through the thin carpet, through the thick cement, through the pipes, through the basement, through the ground, all the way to the core of the earth, so that the burning in my face would feel cool next to the plasma underneath everything. Instead, I raise my hand, feeling the heat rise from my throat. The substitute looks at me and smiles. Next time, speak a little louder. All day long, the volume of my listening to her voice is turned up on high. I can't focus on the math problems on the worksheet. When it is free writing time, I can't write anything at all. Every time she asks a question, I look away so she doesn't ask me anything. I'm exhausted when I get home. I'm exhausted every day after that. I'm exhausted every time I go to school. I'm exhausted every time we are in the world that speaks English. The only place I'm able to rest is at home. Everyone at home speaks Hmong. My mother, my father, my older sister, and my aunts and uncles and cousins when they visit. Everyone speaks normally to everyone else. It is a song uninterrupted, and it flows and flows. It is time for parent-teacher conferences. The teacher sits on one side of the table. My father, mother, older sister, and I sit on the other. The teacher wants to know, does Kao speak at home? My sister says in home. This teacher also wants to know if Kalia speaks at home. My father and mother look at each other, and then my mother says, tell her Kalia speaks all the time. My sister says in English, My mother wants me to tell you that at home Kao speaks all the time. The teacher bites her bottom lip a little and flattens the line of her mouth, looking at me like I'm a puzzle. The teacher stops biting her bottom lip and the corners of her mouth lift in a smile. She says, Kao is doing well in everything, but she won't talk in school. I turn the volume of my listening down. I focus on the wall behind my teacher's head. I imagine the concrete crumbling and the world outside coming in. The birds, the wind, the leaves touching at their tips. They're clapping for me, but the hands in my lap are clasped tight together. In the car on the way home, my family is quiet. Once in a while, my father looks at me through the rearview mirror. My mother turns her head to check on me. My sister pets my hand. They all feel bad for me. I feel bad for all of us. Our brown car coughs into the air every few seconds. Puffs of smoke rise behind us. No one says anything. I know we all have rocks in our throats, and each of us is trying our best. The problem is that mine has grown too big and heavy for me to move. Recess is the worst time of the day. The pebble I picked up is the size of the tip of my little finger. Its surface is gray but has speckles of white. In the light of the sun, on my palm, the white sparkles like diamonds. It is the most interesting thing I have ever seen in my life. The girl in front of me speaks very clearly and slowly. She says, "Do you want to play with me?" All of my heart wants to play with her, but the weight of the rock is too heavy for my tongue to lift. My throat works, but the words don't come out. The rock grows bigger and bigger as the seconds pass. I don't know how to dislodge it. So I grip the little pebble in my palm. I don't look at her, and I shake my head. No. When she walks away, I repeat her name again and again. Julia, Julia, Julia Chang, I tell myself. One day, maybe she can be my friend. And I'll read to you from the author's note. That is 7-year-old Kalia, standing in St. Paul, Minnesota, newcomer Kalia, standing in the McDonough housing project because her father says that she looks so cute in her brand new jeans. She is smiling, but that Kalia doesn't speak at school. And I'll read to you now from the author's note. I was 6 years old and my family came to America as refugees of war from the camps in Thailand. For the first years of my life, Rome was the language that I had built my home in. When I entered school, English was everywhere. Slowly I picked it up in bits and pieces. I liked the way the words tasted different in my mouth, the way they did not need more air to float, the way they connected to one another. Not like words holding hands, but like magnets and metal. Everything changed when I was 7 years old. I became a selective mute in English halfway between 1st and 2nd grade. I stopped talking at school. I got by with nodding and doing the thumbs up. In fact, I wouldn't speak in English voluntarily until I went to college. In college, I learned how to whisper. When I became a writer, some of my childhood teachers came to my events to hear my voice. They knew me. They all said I hadn't changed much, but they had never heard me talk before. A few of them wept hearing my voice for the first time. One of the big questions in all of my years of silence was why. At 43 years old, I'm finally ready to answer. This book is that answer. I'm answering the children who asked the question directly and sincerely all those years ago when I couldn't answer them. The children who were trying to understand. I'm answering the children who, like me, were also quiet and weren't sure why or were afraid of hurting those around them with their honest answers. I want each child who is afraid to talk, unable to find the words, to know that sometimes it takes a long time for us to understand and an even longer time to express ourselves. I'm answering the question for the second grade child who was me, young Kalia, who wanted and wished desperately to one day be able to answer this question for herself, her teachers, and especially her family. Mother, you used to say, I don't understand why you won't speak at school. I used to tell you, I don't know either. Mother, I can tell you now, as a child, I saw the people who spoke fluent English walk away from your efforts to be understood, and I felt your pain. I can protect you, so I did the only thing I knew to do. I stopped talking in English. It was my great revolution against a world I knew was not listening to you. I could control when the rock in my throat started weighing me down. I felt sad and sorry that I couldn't speak for myself or for you for so many years. But those years have come and gone. I now know that sometimes the words that I cannot speak into the world, I can write in it. Now when I think back to all those silent years when I listened and listened, I'm filled with gratitude for the lessons I learned. I'm thankful that I know to be patient when others are struggling into language. I understand so well what it is like to be lonely, and in the end, to love and appreciate the people who offer friendship. Julia Chang became my friend, first through the letters that we wrote to each other, and then later through the life experiences we shared. It is that girl standing before you today. It took a long time to answer the question, asked and unasked, all of those long years through. I think so much of my story is made possible because of a woman, my mother, who struggled and who fell into a language that was entirely new for her. She was born into the Hmong language. She had been the only girl in her school to go to, in her village to go to school, so my mother spoke Laotian, and she even learned a little bit of French because Laos was a French colony. When the American Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America made the decision to wage a war in Laos, a secret war, when they commissioned 32,000 Hmong men and boys, 8, 9, and 10 years old, to fight and to die on America's behalf. And America, because America does not want to be known as a nation who manufactures combat foods for children, they could not make shoes for their child soldiers, so they issued them many, many pairs of socks. But everybody knew that when the bombs fell, because Laos was the most healthy bomb nation in the world, only the world didn't know it. When the bombs fell and the shoes came flying in the air, everybody knew that it was the children dying. That is the war that severed my mother from her dreams. That is the war that would bring my parents, young people, together in the jungles of Laos. Their families were all fleeing from persecution after the United States of America withdrew its troops from Laos because the war was so unpopular, because there was so much loss in Vietnam. Kao Kalia Yang, the leading communist paper, announced an agenda in their big paper. It is necessary to exterminate down to the root the Hmong minority. So big trucks entered these little villages, and they filled them with the last and the remaining Hmong men and boys. The women and the girls waited in the villages for them to return. When the days passed and the weeks came, they started looking for them. And they said that they found them fallen like fruit on the jungle floor, rotting away. When those trucks came to my father's village, his older brother ran away, leading hundreds and then thousands after him. He would become the leader of the rebel. They would run around in circles in the density of the Laotian jungles for years. My mom met my dad in that jungle. She was 16 and he was 19. In a war where nobody had clothes anymore, he was astonished to see this young woman with a pair of flip-flops on her feet. And what's more, my mother had twirled a strand of beads in her hair, in her long hair. He smiled, and she was astounded by the whiteness of his teeth. Long ago, toothpaste, they were a thing of a world before the sky that they lived under fell on them, before the earth that they walked on threw them off. But my father smiled, and she knew even then that he, like everybody else, was brushing his teeth burnt banana peels, boiled and boiled until the liquid became slippery like soap. But somehow she thought he had perfect teeth. And in a war with no tomorrow, where all of the adults and the elders said, no, now is not a good time to think of marriage, to think of love. These two young people, they chose a path. And that path would eventually lead to me, my brothers and my sisters. But that path would sever my mother from her mother forever. My mother was 16. My father was 19. They had married against the better wishes and the guidance of their elders. They were visiting her mother for a regular meal, they thought. Everybody was hiding out. And my grandma, she was on her way to a mountain stream to get water so she could use the last of the rice to make a porridge for dinner to feed her daughter and her new son-in-law. But there was news that 10,000 soldiers were coming. And my father told my mother that they had to leave because if they didn't, then they wouldn't be able to find their way back to his family. And my mother was 16 and she said she was stupid and she did not want to fight with her new husband in front of her family. And so she watched her mother looking at her and she let my father pull her hand away, thinking that the sun would rise again and there would be another tomorrow. Thinking that she could run and hold her mother again. My mother did not say goodbye. She let my father pull her away, and she never saw her mother again. That is the dream and the nightmare that she lives with. All my life with her, she's told me about this moment again and again, till it is a soundtrack in my brain. I never got to meet that grandma, because my mother would leave with my father across the Mekong River. Then they would end up in the refugee camps of Thailand, where I would be born. And all I knew was a scratchy voice on a tape recorder, looking for my mother, looking for me, telling me that even though you don't know me, I am your grandmother, I am your mother's mother, and I love you. Growing up, I had the one grandma who I loved dearly, the late homecomer, Jolie. That woman who was a shaman, a medicine woman, a healer. That woman who for me filled up so much of the world around me that I did not know, and I thought I did not need the love of the other grandma. And then she died in Laos. And everybody would look at me and they'd say, you have her jawbone. You're not tall like her, your neck isn't long like her, but you have her jawbone. And I would look at this black and white photo, this picture that my mother carried across all of these years, and I tried to see myself in her. It wasn't until I became a mother myself that I understood. It wasn't until I heard my mother saying to my daughter, my Shen Yang, your grandmother loves you, that I knew what I had lived my life missing. When I started my journey as a writer, I knew that I had to write 3 books. One of them would be my grandmother's story, Choli's story, and that would become the late homecomer. One of them would be my father's story, because my father is a song poet. In the Hmong tradition, growing up, my father made the mold growing wild on our walls beautiful. He'd say, what do you see here? And we would see the Chinese paintings that we watch on Channel 2 coming to life. You know, the mold would become a jagged mountain, and the crane would emerge, and suddenly we could see the river running far below. That tree that chooses to live in a place where you think life is inconceivable. And my father, in a poet's way, he'd say to us, although Christmas was Toys for Tots and Thanksgiving was Meals on Wheels, and we shopped in church basements, my father would say to us, you are not poor children, because your hearts are not poor places. My children are not. His poetry shielded us from the poverty of our lives. So I knew I had to write a book about him. You know, most of the people, they know my dad is a machinist. He has incredibly rough hands. Well, human flesh cuts into metal, it suffers. The Hmong gesture of love is this: when you wipe away someone's hair. And when my father wipes away your hair, you have to make sure you have the right face on, because it hurts. You don't want to say that it hurts or will stop. So you have to really work on your face. So I knew that I would write that book, and it would be called The Song Poet. And I knew that it would be like the second album that never came out, because a long time ago my dad came out with an album of song poetry. And we sold it at the July 4th, the annual soccer tournament. I think one of the biggest summer festivals in the nation. And my mom and dad had made $5,000. And his goal was always that he would come up with a second album. But that fall, because I'm not stupid, I knew they had money. And so I told my dad that I wouldn't go to school unless he bought us new school supplies. I was tired of sharpening the old pencils and ripping out the old pages from the notebooks. My dad looked at me and then he went to that $5,000 and he got all of us new school supplies. And when the wind started shifting and the leaves started falling, my older sister, because she also was not dumb, she said, Dad, I'm not going to go to school unless you buy me a new winter jacket, scarves and mittens and a hat. We had never gotten these things before, brand new. And my father looked at her and he went to the $5,000. And the younger kids saw what we were doing and they too needed and wanted things. And so the second album never came out. So after The Late Homecomer had come out, a producer from TPT had come to our house to do a special on me. And this producer had asked my dad, what does it feel like to give birth to a writer when you are one yourself? And I was interpreting for him, but my dad said, I can barely read the things my daughter writes. I'm not a writer. And so then I knew I had to write the second book. But a book about my mother, I thought I could wait a long time. Because I was 16 and then I became 26 and then I became 36. And I thought I could wait forever. Because it's a hard thing, it's a daunting thing to take on your mother's voice. Especially my mother with her tender, tender hands. Her hurting hands because they've suffered working in the factories. And so I thought I would wait forever, but then the pandemic swept through. And suddenly the clock was ticking very fast and it was stopping on people I loved and cared for deeply. Because the COVID pandemic hit the mall community disproportionately hard because we're so communal in so many of the things we do. And suddenly I knew that if I didn't write it, then I wouldn't get the chance to write it and to finish it in time. I knew that for my third memoir, I wanted to write it when my mother was still here, so that she could correct me where I was getting things wrong. And so I did the thing that I wanted to do, but I was afraid to do. I wrote Where Rivers Part. But I couldn't find a right perspective. I wanted to do it in the third person, the second person, anything but the first. Although as a teacher of writing, I know that there is no other perspective in the English language that brings you closer to a character than that first person view of the world. And I tried it, and it wasn't working. And my mother said to me, do you know how many times I've spoken so that your needs might be met? And I remember all of the times she stood on her tippy toes, all along those counters where she's had to ask the questions, where we waited in silence for people who may or may not return to come back because of her thick accent, to tell us where the light bulbs were, or the poster boards for all of those presentations that we did in elementary school. I thought about all of that and I started writing Where Rivers Part. I'm going to read a little bit to you from that book. That is the third and final family memoir that I promised myself I would do as a young writer. I went on this journey young. I was 22 when I went on the journey to becoming a writer because my grandmother, Julie, the grandma who I knew, had died, whose big fear was that she would be forgotten, who had never been to school, who did not know how to read or write, who all of my life with her signed her name with a shaky act that stood in for Julie. 22, came out when I was 27. And a librarian here invited me to speak at a library then. That was lifetimes ago. 3 lifetimes in my life to be exact. I have 3 kids now. And that was before husband, before children. And those children and that husband is wandering around somewhere in this amazing library. But this book, Where Rivers Part, took a long time to come. And it opens with a poem. Not because I'm a poet, but because I'm a poet's daughter. We have a picture too. So I'll read to you from that poem. My mother was born in a village called Dechua, where rivers come together. It's an island village with a single dirt road leading out, and on this island her father had a citrus orchard. They grew all kinds of citrus, and he was always creating the next thing. He died and he was buried underneath that orchard. My mom thought she would never leave the island village, because everyone she loved was there. And she loved the way the flowers bloomed, and the way they fell down and blanketed her father on the ground. She never wanted to leave, but of course, she had to leave. And so it opens with a poem about that place. There was once a monkhouse that sat where two rivers met. The house was made of wood. There was a shingle bamboo roof on top. Out back, there was a garden filled with herbs and spices. In my memories, the house fills my heart. Remembering it makes me weep. One day, I will return. This monkhouse will be full of people again. Mother will sit among the flowering mint in the garden. Father will stand by the door underneath the overhang of the roof. My brothers and sisters will bound. The living and the dead will be together at long last. There was once a monkhouse that sat where two rivers met. And it opens with a quote by the Renaissance writer Dorothy West. There is no life that does not contribute to history. There is no life that does not contribute to history. I'm going to read just one paragraph from this page. So if you have the book, you can follow me. It's page 244. Let's skip around. Sometimes I'm chasing story. Sometimes I'm chasing meaning on the page. Sometimes I have no idea where the words come from, but I can't dislodge them. In this one paragraph, I had no idea where it came from. I was just writing, and then there it was. In the chasm between heaven and earth, all the mothers stand, holding the sky above their children. When the load is heavy, their knees bend, their arms shake, the earth trembles with their remote exertions. They do this so that the children remain protected. Even when the mothers are gone, the force of their love lingers in the light of dawn, beneath the sprinkles of sun and rain. May it always be so. I understand that in English, maybe the word I'm looking for here is prayer. And then I'm going to skip ahead again. And I will tell you what page I'm on if you want to follow along. Page 298. Night is falling. My mother, my sisters, and I are bathing by the wide river. It is a cool evening. Steam rises from the surface of the water. I hear my sisters dipping their bowls into the warmth of the river, washing themselves. I look at my mother untwirling her long hair. I ask her, "Mother, are we going to be in this village forever?" Her lips curve up and she tells me, "Yes, Jude, part of us will always be here." I ask her, "Will we be here together?" She answers, "Yes, we will." And then I'm going to take you to the end, the epilogue. And now this is my voice, and I knew this is where the book had to end. I knew that for my mother to see her mother again, she would have to leave me. And so I wrote it into being. By a mountain stream still flowing, the ghost of my nearby waits for my mother in a jungle clearing. It has taken me 42 years to realize that mothers will wait for their children no matter how long it takes. In the Hmong culture, when it is time for my mother to begin her journey to the land of the ancestors, she would need the little pieces of water-stained and time-weathered embroidery her mother gave her on her wedding day. She has kept them safe all these years and carried them from one country to the next, one house to the other. They are necessary so that in the world that awaits on the other side of life, she'll be able to find her mother. My mother will wear a strand of beads in her thick hair, grown long and thick again. She will find her way back through the dense jungle, shed the heartache of the years, cross the rivers of her life one by one, until she makes it to the place where her mother stands. She will run to the older woman who has been waiting, a water pail at her side. Her mother's arms will open wide. My mother will feel the warmth of her mother's embrace. In the arms of her mother, Junwo will be cherished, nurtured, seen, and adored by the woman who loves her best in all of the world. Ju will let go of the hurt that this life has delivered, the mistakes that she has made, the wrongs that have been done to her. She will shine in the light of her mother's eyes, bright and new again. Together they will walk that dirt path toward the village of Dechuo, where two rivers meet. The tall grass on either side of the dirt road will welcome them back. They will return to the spread of that citrus orchard, and the trees will be alive, full of green leaves and ripe fruit, pomelos and grapefruits, lemons and limes, tangerines and clementines. The oranges with the segment skin so thin that it melts in the mouth. They will walk hand in hand to the door of the wooden house. They will not need to knock. The door will swing open. Inside, my mother's father, her brothers and sisters, their wives and husbands, their children, all of them will rejoice at their return. The reunion will be a beautiful one. They will drink and eat and share all the stories that have lived far apart from each other, stories that have been waiting to come together. They will know that they have carried each other's memory for a long time and be happy to set down the missing and celebrate their homecoming. And then the dedication, which I've never read out loud. This record is for Junwo, for the gift of your stories, for the tenderness of your love. Nia, through you, Nia's love flows. Thank you so much.
I have a microphone. If you want to raise a hand for the question, I will come to you. Surely I know your speeches, but...
How did you ever think of your mom being with your mom?
How did you think about your mom being with her mom?
That is gorgeous. I never thought of that myself, but now I'm sitting here sobbing thinking about it.
She's saying she finds herself sobbing thinking about her own mother with her mother.
You know, for me, sometimes you write a book and you don't know where it's going to end. But if I can grant my mother any wish at all, it would be for that reunion to happen. And if I could grant my own wish at all, it would be to be there when that reunion happens. That's the gift of art. That is why I'm a writer. That is why I'm an artist. It allows these wishes to come together. I've always understood that lots of people, that they were depositing their wishes inside of me ever since I was a little girl. My grandmother, my mother, my father, even my older sister, they all had wishes for me in the world that I belong to. And so then I started thinking, what if every single one of us, what if we're all wishing wells? And what if we're not only depositories of wishes, but what if we're makers of them? And so then I wrote those lines, and I made those wishes come true in the pages of a book. I think that has always been the thing for art, for me.
I really appreciate your explanation as to how you decided to write in the first person and how challenging that was. I also wondered, and I'm about halfway through the book, and you write a lot of personal stuff about your parents, and much of it is difficult and challenging. How did you do that, basically, is how you came to do that, and how was it?
Fun is the wrong word. It's not fun. My mom was particularly surprised by how much attention I'd been paying their marriage. She hadn't known. But then I reminded her the walls are thin. And if you all just live in a 900 square feet home and there's 8 of you, the walls are big, you hear a lot of things, you see a lot of things. But my mom, especially that scene that I wrote where she's at the market, she has 2 living girls, but she has all of these dead little boys, and she wanted to visit the little boys. That scene was brutal, and you can see it in the writing, that I was trying to give my heart room to breathe, that in that moment, my mother becomes the woman walking to the camp market, the woman asking for the pills. Her hand, like a bird, flies atop of the little packets until it's captured in the hand of the older woman. I talked to my mom about that, and she said to me, I'm not the only mother who's tried to visit the other side. There are many, many women who've known these losses. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Which gave me tremendous freedom. My parents are incredibly brave. I understand this. I'm a memorist. My siblings, they have no choice but to be brave as well. But I couldn't do what I do if I didn't know exactly what team I'm playing on. If I didn't understand what my father has tried to teach me ever since I was a little girl. Human experience is individual. It is not unique. Human experience is individual. It is not unique. The job of the artist is to harvest from the garden of humanity. That is the job of an artist. But I could not have written this book, I don't think, if I had been younger. Before I met my husband, before there was somebody who could take me away from the safety of my mom and dad's arms, before I held my daughter for the first time, felt her beating heart in my arms. There were things that I needed to understand before I could write this book. Of the 3 memoirs that I've written, for me, from a craft perspective, this one was the trickiest one. And then from an emotional perspective, to sustain the 300-odd pages in my mother's perspective, there were many moments when I didn't know if I could do it. But then I didn't have the money to return to my editors and the publisher. And so, how many options do you have? You know, but I think I speak for lots of artists and writers and creators when I say this. Sometimes your whole life is caught up in something and you know that if you don't do it, then you don't know if you can survive. Which is true of any survivor. You don't know if you're going to make it until you do. You don't know if you're going to make it until you do. And so, yeah, there were many moments when I didn't know if I could make it. And then ending a book is hard because my mother has all of these stories, and even as I was doing the edits, she was telling me new stories that I wanted to include. But I knew that this would never end. It could become a book of everything. And then I looked at myself very, very solemnly, and I looked at my mother, and I understood. There's more than one book in my mother. And there's more than one book in me. Each and every single one of us in this room. And that gave me then the courage to end it.
I read the second one.
The Song Poet.
Yes, I'm looking forward to reading the third one, but the second one was just beautiful and moving. And one thing I wondered is how your brother is doing.
My brother is expecting his second child, and I just told him, "You think you're tired now?" Yeah, that needs to be a lot more tired very soon. So December 29th, they're expecting their second. It'll be a little girl. So they have sisters. You know, one of my older sister is my best friend. She's a year and 9 months older than me, but all of our lives together, she's always acted the world older. If I ask her a question, then she finds a way to give me an answer. And I remember the one time I didn't believe her and I tested her. She said that foul was a word, and I said she had made it up. And I bet $50, that was all I had, and I lost it. Because she took on the old Webster dictionary. It just didn't sound like a word to me. We're both coming into English new. Who would create a word like bobble? And so then, in a moment of grace, she looked at me and she gave me my $50 back and she says, "Don't question me again." I've never questioned her again with money. I've questioned her again with other things. But I think it's so special that my brother will have this opportunity to raise two sisters. My father has always said, ever since we were little girls and we'd fight, he'd say, do you two know that you two will occupy more of each other's lives than anyone else? That when your great loves have come and gone, that if you're lucky, that you two will still share more of your lives together. You are life partners. And then I think it's such a responsibility to raise life partners. But that's what my brother will get to do, which is to say he is surviving. Which is to say also that his life is flourishing and blooming in different directions, and what joy it gives me. Yesterday was Halloween, and his little pumpkin could go trick-or-treating with everyone else, but she loved the rocking chair. And I think it was one of the most beautiful Halloweens I've ever had, rocking this little one. You know, watching all the trick-or-treaters come to the door. We probably looked a little scary. I was a couch potato, holding a pumpkin, rocking in a chair. We probably looked a little scary, but it was such a beautiful thing. And one of the things that I couldn't see, all the gifts they would bring me, all these kids that I've taken care of, changed diapers, bathed all along the way. I couldn't see that one day soon, long before, that they would be taking care of me. You know, when I gave birth to my identical twins, I died. I coded at HCMC. And in the days after, my heart hurt so much because they had to do chest compressions to bring me back to life. I didn't know that little girl, Shilu, who I used to take care of and hated changing her diapers, that she would be bathing me. How incredibly humbling it is to sit there and to watch my brother cooking for me. My father, again, because he's full of words. My mother doesn't speak as much as my dad. She listens, or she doesn't, but she doesn't speak as much as my dad, which is make you want to be somewhere the song poet also was much easier for me to write than We're Rivers Apart. He always said that we were so lucky because we were born into an ocean of love so big, our hands have never touched the sides, our feet have never touched the bottom. That we can float because of each other. So yeah, I didn't see how they would hold me up for the longest time. And now that I see it, there's only like 20, 30 more good years left, people. But that is the nature of life. That is the nature of the gifts that we give, the gifts that we've been given. Not a question of time. It's a question of how we hold each other up. Did I answer your question?
I was just worried about
He's holding, and he'll be much more sleep deprived soon. But right now, he's holding. We have 5 minutes left.
I want you to talk about, you may have noticed in the lobby that Kalia has made many children's books, and you have some more to come. Can you tell us about your books that are on the way?
Yes. Oh, I'm so very excited. Well, first and foremost, on December 19th, I'll be at the Ordway Center for Performing Arts in the concert hall, and we'll be doing all the children's literature of Kao Kalia Yang. I wrote a libretto, so I know I can write songs. So I wrote 2 songs. I will not sing them because my voice can be a little bothersome. But T. Michael Rambo, who is an incredible singer and actor, will be singing one of them. And Leslie DeMasso, who is an incredible singer as well, will sing the other. It's going to be a really magical night. Because since 2019, I've published 9 children's books. One of them is for the International Fund for Agricultural Development for the United Nations. As a refugee kid, I've always wanted to give back to the United Nations. You know, when you're born in a camp and you wait for food 3 days a week, you really got rations 3 days a week, but it's at the United Nations, a High Commissioner for Refugees truck that enters the camp. You think those are the heroes, those are the people who make possible so many and so much life, where in spaces of war and conflict. And so I've always wanted to do something with them. And when they came to me 2 summers ago, they said, we want you to write a book, but only for the children of Laos, never to be published in America. Do you want to do that? And I said, of course. So I wrote a book called The Year the Cold Didn't Come. You can't Google this book, and it will come up on their website, but it's only published in Laos. But I've written 8 children's books because small children hurt and hope and dream in this world that we live in. But so few of them ever get to read books about themselves and the people who love them. And because our stories are always worth it. I've written all of these other books. And this 2026, I'll have 3 more. So last year I had 4 books coming out, 5 including one for the United Nations. This year, it's been a writing year for me. This next year, I'll have 3 more coming out. In February, 2 of them will come out, The Blue House I Loved, which is about a real house that used to exist on the east side of St. Paul, right behind Payne in the arcade. The house housed refugees, and it's now just a plot of green grass. If it were summertime, I would have the publisher go so we could project a screen and do a reading right there. But it's going to be February 10th, and we live in Minnesota. The closest I can get is the Arlington Hills Public Library, which is right there on that corner, so you can still just point to it. So I'll launch the book there, but it's illustrated by an architect, Jen Shin, Yale-trained architect, whose dream was to illustrate for a picture book. And so, isn't it great when you can make a dream come true? That's also your dream. So we have this book coming out, and the art is exquisite. We ask ourselves, how is a house designed? How do we make our own? How do we use a house the way it's meant to be used and the way we need it to be used? Which is a very interesting question. And then also about all of the ghost houses that haunt us still, that make us remember how to love. And I think it's so special. And then in that same month, just a week apart, a whole month of pages coming out. And that is the story of how a writer finds a life on a page. It's beautifully illustrated. If you know a map into the world, then you know the artist Seo Kim. We're collaborating again. Except this time I'm older and Seo is older. In that very first book, Seo didn't know how to illustrate, how to carry a child. She never had one. Now she's a mother. So you can see the difference in the art, and you can see these connections being made. That one is also incredibly beautiful, and I'm excited. A home on the page. It's about how you build homes for each other and for yourself. In the spaces where you can and you need it most. And then October, I have a book coming out, and that's going to be my first Christmas book ever. It's called Mama's Christmas Gift, and it's inspired by real life. When I was a kid, my mother would disappear every Christmas Eve, and we wouldn't know where she was going. And then she'd come back with a bag, and we'd look in there, and there'd be Christmas toys for us, sometimes a hat or a scarf. But we would get something so that we would know that we could be good children too. It wasn't until I was in National Honor Society and I was a senior in high school volunteering at Salvation Army. It wasn't until that I saw my mother standing in that line at Toys for Tots. And I knew where the gifts had come from. And I still remember seeing what it looks like her jacket and being a little bit afraid. Long line of mothers, it's gray and it's snowing, and I'm just there to check off names. And then she's standing before me, and the valedictorian of my graduation class says, "Why are you staring?" And I whisper, "She is my mother." And he says, "What is she doing here?" I could answer. So that book is coming. It's Mama's Christmas Gift. And it's going to have an original soundtrack by Jocelyn Hagen. It's very fun because she said, "What Christmas carols do you love the most?" And I think I said her 25. It will be exciting to see what she comes up with. But 3 picture books coming up. And in 2027, there's going to be more coming from me as well. I understand now that I've lived long enough, we live in different seasons. There are seasons of flood and seasons of drought. And I'm in the flooding years of my life. Thank you for being here with me. I look forward to signing any books that you like signed as Christmas gifts or for yourselves. And then I hope to see some of you on December 19th. Tickets are on sale on our website, the Ordways website. Thank you.